what are Dark Troopers? What's going to be the impact potentially on the Star Wars story here? Because when that scene first opened up, were you aware of what was going on? Because at first, I really thought they were clones of Vader. I thought it was Vader armor that was up in the wall with the tubes hooked up. And then a closer look, I was like, oh, that might be a Dark Trooper helmet. And then the internet, we kind of figured it out together. Was that how you digested that scene, or did you have a different take?
I saw people going, oh, it's Vader clones, it's Dark Troopers, it's Death Troopers. I'm like, so those aren't empty flight suits, because that's what I thought they were.
Mm-hmm.
Like, like TIE pilot suits that were just kind of hanging and waiting to be used. I'm like, okay, sinister, they have an army, but I didn't realize that those were meant to be like bodies. So I have a lot of canon in my head, but like late 90s, early 2000s video game is not on my radar. So thanks to the lovely people at this network, everybody kind of caught me up on Dark Troopers.
Well, and I and you're exactly right, though, because in Star Wars Legends, as it's known today, Arezou, the Dark Trooper is from the video game Star Wars Dark Forces, which, by the way, if you haven't already, you should definitely check out the conversation we just had last week with John Knowles of LucasArts. He was there in the 90s and early 2000s, and he's responsible for Dark Forces along with other games. And so it's really interesting to see how the Dark Trooper has arrived here in canon, because like I said, Dark Forces in current canon, it's in their Star Wars Commander, for example, very similar to the Purge Trooper we see in Force Unleashed. And so it's really interesting, again, how Disney, Lucasfilm, Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau, they're taking what is a fan favorite from the EU and they're repurposing it, which is really exciting, I think, for several reasons. And the evolution of it is something that I want to dive into in a little bit. But I just think that this is not like a love letter to fans, but it's like anyone who's been invested in the story for 3 decades, or anyone who's taken time to go back and find out about who these Dark Troopers are. Like, this is like an immediate payoff, Arezou, for them to see these on screen. Right. My question is, and I know that you have some of this that we've prepared. The Dark Trooper itself has kind of evolved. There's been a couple of phases. Can you break that down real quick about how, because they started out as droids, right? And then they evolved to, so like Iron Man armor.
Down.
Yeah.
Bear with me. But so they evolved into the Dark Trooper program.
Mm-hmm.
And the failure of this program is why the people in charge sort of started to distrust droids or combat droids. And then, so this is where these Phase 2 Dark Troopers come. And they were used during the Imperial military, during the Galactic Civil War, and the battle for Tatooine. So they're coming in stages. So I guess now, to your point, David, if they're being pulled from Legends and now being brought in, what phase are we in, I guess, would be my question now. What phase of this are we in? Where are we at? Because I know, like, timeline-wise, where we are, but...
Yeah, I think that's a really...
What part of this are they bringing in, I guess, would be my question.
I think it's really fascinating because we're in a moment, Arezou, where it seems every big Imperial baddie that we get has to have a big bad project they're in charge of. And it's up to them to do or die to impress the Emperor. Because if they fail, the story has a way of killing them. And so you have Tarkin, who has the Death Star, and you can argue Krennic, I understand.
Krennic has, poor Krennic. Poor Krennic.
Right, poor Krennic.
But, like, Krennic had the Death Star. Tarkin has his ambition.
Thrawn had the TIE Defender program, right? In Star Wars Rebels, we learn how he's trying to get TIEs. The whole purpose, I think, was getting them to hit hyperspace, right? So
yeah, that was so refreshing. The one Imperial project that had nothing to do with the Death Star. I'm like, good, right? Yes.
It shows they've diversified how they want to ruin the galaxy. I mean, rule the galaxy. I'm sorry, ruin. I think what we're seeing here is this is Moff Gideon's project. This is the Dark Trooper. This is how the Empire is going to once again elevate itself. And what's interesting, when you go through the canon, the lore of the Dark Trooper, the Empire, this is just one of those examples of how the Empire falls out of love with droids. So we're going to try and get humanoids to function within this technology that we've developed. Really excited to see how this unfolds. The question that I have, and I think a lot of people have on their mind, are these Dark Troopers somehow connected to those creatures that we're seeing in the test tube in that laboratory on Nevarro? My assumption is they're two different things. They're in the same room. Or am I supposed to assume that they're actually the same thing? Is that being growing to be put into that armor? Where do you stand on this idea that the child is fuel for either whatever in that tank or for those troopers that are hooked up to all those tubes?
I think the child is fuel for the pickle Snoke in the tank. I don't think that it's related to the Dark Troopers, because I think, if it's a lab, then they've got more than one thing going on. So they're building these enhanced soldiers, and that's sort of, it looks like it's ready to go. Like those things look ready to deploy. But the clone in the tank clearly has a long way to go. Dr. Pershing says it's got a long way to go, and he's not confident about it. So I think they're two separate things.
I can roll with that.
It'd be good because that's like two threats, right? So
I think you're right. A lot of speculation suggests that the creature in the tube is the precursor or the origins of the Snoke program. So the Emperor trying to find a way to create a clone that he can put his essence into. And again, Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, were pretty open about this when The Mandalorian was kicking off. This series is also going to give some insight into the origins of the First Order. And then we know the First Order was actually this program to buy some time. It was kind of a distraction to allow the Final Order to grow in strength out there in the unknown regions on Exegol. I would be curious to think if they would be so bold to show those as Snokes. I would almost imagine that those are some kind of maybe a cyborg. Maybe that's not the best term to use, but some cross that's being used to power this large Iron Man-like armor that is the Dark Trooper. And my idea would be that, are they trying to somehow create a program that these powerful beings would also be force sensitive, which is, I assume, why you would want the child, assuming that it's M count.
That's why you need an M count.
Love the reference, by the way. I'm fine with midichlorians. It doesn't bother me at all. There's a science to Star Wars, and George Lucas wanted to explore that. So it works for me. That said, though, it would make more sense. Like, that's why the Snoke theory to me makes a lot of sense, is because the child having a high M count, at least that's assumption. I mean, 50 years young, the child seems very capable in the Force. And so could the child's DNA, blood, life force be able to fuel these early versions of the Snoke clone? Maybe. Maybe
I'm having a thought now.
Go ahead.
Maybe using like the child's blood, like because the child is not human and Snoke is humanoid, and like he's not force sensitive when they're creating him, and they inject him with this non-human force sensitive blood, could that be causing part of his distortion?
I like that idea. I like that idea a lot.
Probably not, but it's fun to think about.
I think it's, and that's what's so exciting about this show. And to the credit of the creators and Disney and the format of Disney Plus, we get to do this every week. We get to do this every week together, which is take that 40, that 30 to 50 minutes that they give us and, kind of play with it, kind of imagine what could happen next. And this past week, I was kind of nervous about what this episode would do. It was a slow buildup. I felt like there was action, but my goodness, the last 3 minutes of this episode was the meat and the potatoes. I think Carl Weathers did a phenomenal job directing this episode, and the canon, the lore, the expansion, the potential that is now in The Mandalorian is huge. And Dave Filoni, he gets a 51-minute episode this week, and we assume that will be the live-action debut of Ahsoka Tano, which is really exciting. Does the Dark Trooper program, just knowing that, and I say knowing, we don't know. It could be something else, but we're pretty confident in Dark Trooper. In fact, if you listen to the episode with the audio impaired track, Dark Trooper is said. So it feels really safe to call them Dark Troopers. Arezou, does this program, Gideon's love child, the Dark Trooper, are we about to witness an event that could arguably make Moff Gideon one of the top villains in Star Wars, and he's had minimal screen time. But is he positioned to become one of the great villains in the catalog in the Star Wars galaxy?
I think he's in a good position to become a main villain to us, the audience, like to sort of become the ultimate threat, maybe to Mando, to the child, to this pocket of the story. I don't know how big his impact is going to be, because we know, 20 years from now, 25 years from now, that he wasn't the ultimate threat to the galaxy. So I think his influence in universe is limited, but I think in terms of the impact on the audience, I think that yes, that he's in that position to become like up there with like the other big bads.
I'm really excited to see what we get here with this next installment, because I think it's going to be really inspiring for fans. I think it's going to be a thrill. And we mentioned potentially the live action debut of Ahsoka Tano. We'll get to that later in the show, but just really thrilled to see what we get here. I personally think that Moff Gideon will be top tier. I'm saying it's Vader. I'm saying it's Tarkin, and I maybe Moff does take Krennic out of the top 3 for me. So it'll be really exciting to see what does unfold. Here's the thing, though, that's crazy is Moff Gideon doesn't probably even know he's going to get Ahsoka Tano when he tracks down the Mandalorian this week. If it plays out the way we think, he's just trying to get his hands on the child. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this unfolds.
Thank you for watching Beyond the Blast Doors. Be sure to subscribe to our channel. Don't forget, give us a thumbs up and leave a comment. Beyond the Blast Doors, a Star Wars conversation.